Fellow. Ian Maurice has been keeping a weather eye on all those scoreboards from playing arenas near and far. Here he is with the latest.
Ken, the Sheffield Shield looks certain to stay in New South Wales. It's been a pretty slow third day at the SCG. New South Wales batsmen have been content to plod along. Tasmania hasn't been able to do much about it. At last report, New South Wales 7 for 352 in reply to Tasmania's 255. Michael Bevan was out 15 short of Graham Yallop's record of the most runs in a Shield season. Today he made 113.
Michael Bevan's century put pay to Tasmania's hopes of a first Shield trophy, but today his run-getting triumph ended prematurely. After adding 11 to his 102, he fell to Sean Young's consistency playing on. Shane Lee also let his guard down, Young grabbing successive wickets, but was the early breakthrough enough to turn the Tasmanian fortune around? Martin Hayward made sure of the doubters, his bat striking sweetly. He had made 73 when Matthews got his measure. Hayward had slaved at the crease for more than 5 hours.
Now some rugby league scores. A reminder, our match of the round is Canterbury and Souths. Penrith and East play tonight at Penrith Stadium. In the other games, it's Canberra leading Newcastle 30 points to 8 and Balmain leading the Gold Coast 36 to 12, getting close to full time there. In AFL, 2 matches in progress at the moment. Melbourne playing Geelong and Melbourne well in front of Geelong, 26 goals 18 to Geelong 16-13, and Brisbane and the Sydney Swans doing battle. Close game this one, the Swans in front by 2 points. In golf, Australia's Greg Norman has a 4-shot lead after 3 rounds of the Players' Championship in Florida. Norman carded a third round 67 to be a record 19 under for the tournament. Best of the other Australians is Craig Parry, tied for 10th after a third round 73.
The Shark bared his teeth early. His tee shot setting up birdie chances galore.
Coming straight at the flag, little left.
Problems loomed at the 5th, but Norman's ingenuity produced this recovery.
He was probably aiming 30 feet right on that and just played a pull hook. That's what
Fuzzy Zeller was Norman's main challenger. Shots like this giving him a share of the lead.
Watch that swing, it's just so casual. Slop it up and slop it back, stiff it.
But Norman went in front again at the 12th, accepting this birdie opportunity to move to 17 under. The shot of the day came from American Gary Hallberg.
On this hole during the tournament, the 13 years that the Players' Championship has been played here, it's only the 5th ace ever in the Players'
Zeller and Norman shared a mid-round joke, the Americans' good mood dampened by this watery finish at 17. Norman's radar strayed temporarily on the 18th.
And to the right, way right. That's going toward the cart path.
But even when in trouble, the Australian found the answers.
You heard it. Crowd likes it, and look at this. Holy mackerel, what a shot. That takes some guts and skill, too. Very nice, Greg Norman.
Out of Formula 1, and Ayrton Senna has taken pole position for tomorrow's Brazilian Grand Prix. German Michael Schumacher was second fastest ahead of Frenchman Jean Alesi. Senna dominated the final qualifying session before heavy rain forced an early finish. It's Senna's 63rd pole, a Grand Prix record. Australian David Brabham, driving a Simtek, will start from position 26. And Ken, I'll be back with all the full-time scores shortly.
Good on you, thank you, Ian. And later on Sports Sunday, sheer disinterest puts boxing down for the count. And next, Neil Hawke's latest test.
Do you ever ask yourself, why me? When you can turn around and reflect and say, well, why not me?
30, 40 years ago, you'd be fighting outside to get a seat. If you're paying, say, $80 for a seat in the front row here, you've got to be a special type of person to love fighting to be able to do that.
It's perhaps the mark of a man that former Test cricketer Neil Hawke considers one of the great moments of his life the day he got an edge on a Fred Truman Thunderbolt and gave the big Yorkshire man his 300th Test wicket. A love of life and a generosity of spirit were the hallmarks of Neil Hawke's playing days. And as Jeff Hutchison reports from Adelaide, those same qualities have in recent years helped him survive illness and endure some extraordinary tests.
This is a story about a remarkable life, about a boy who loved cricket and was called up 27 times for his country, who took 91 Test wickets with his deceptive medium pace, and who, when winter closed in, would play football, representing South Australia, kicking bags of goals. Neil James Napier Hawke was a good sport. That years later he would lie in hospital so perilously close to death shocked all who knew him. That he should come out smiling after that decade of trauma was simply the stuff of miracles.
It's no good saying, do you ever ask yourself why me, when you can turn around and reflect and say, well, why not me? What gives me the right to be treated any differently?
Neil Hawke went in for routine bowel surgery in 1980, only to suffer horrible complications. I'll try to make it easy for the queasy, but there was a chronic liver disorder, kidney failure, septicemia, gangrene, 12 cardiac arrests, and an inconceivable 9.5 months in intensive care.
Nobody had gone so far down the road and then come back from the things that I had to endure.
Be it the pleasure of watching a tomato ripen or preparing a lure for a fish he never thought he'd catch, every day Neil Hawke celebrates small, profound triumphs.
You've got to look at the bonuses and think, well, gee, I've been a lucky man, and I keep having a look at funeral notices, you know, first thing of the morning, and if your name's not among them, you think wacky-do, you know, another day.
If illness tested Neil Hawke's faith, then this man shook his belief in human nature. His name, Chris Hart, an English cricket writer, collector of memorabilia, and as Hawke would later learn, a con man. It was 1990, and Neil Hawke thought he was going to die.
That particular time, I was undergoing a very low point health-wise, and in fact, I'd suffered a mental breakdown, so I wasn't completely with it.
What did Chris Hart take from you?
Couple of Australian blazers, SA Cricket Association blazer, an Australian cap.
Months later, Hart told the now recovering Hawke his goods had been damaged on the way to England. It was a lie. Hart had sold them and kept the money. What did you say to Hart when you finally caught up with him?
I said, if you don't come clean, as it were, it'll be the sorriest day's work you've ever done. On top of that, I was concerned if he'd done this to me, how many other people had he done it to?
Chris Hart was the president of the Cricket Society, and my husband was the secretary. And when he died, Chris did the eulogy, and he said that he would help me all he could with a lot of my husband's things. And it was into this room 3 weeks to the day after my husband died that Chris Hart came, and he took everything that was in a filing cabinet there, 4-drawer filing cabinet, which was Cricket Society and cricket memorabilia, and he stripped the lot.
For a few $1,000s, Chris Hart had ripped off a sick man and a grieving widow, but his behaviour was beginning to catch up with him. An English tabloid got onto the story, naming him their Rat of the Week. And back in Adelaide, further suspicions emerged. Step into a bookshop and Chris Hart appears as a well-credentialed author. Indeed, last year he wrote this imposing volume, A History of Australian Cricket. But there's much to read between the lines. A couple of years earlier, he was paid $10,000 to write the history of the South Australian Cricket Association. By the time he finished the book, he delivered only 4,000 of the 5,000 copies ordered, keeping the rest for himself. But that's not all. As part of his meticulous research, he stole films and photographs worth more than $10,000.
There was an enormous amount of trust placed in this man to allow him to write the book. And in the process, of course, he betrayed the trust of many other people.
When Hart returned to Australia to promote his new book last year, he was arrested and charged with the theft. A 3-day trial found him guilty. He was given a suspended sentence and ordered to pay almost $20,000 to the South Australian Cricket Association. Both Neil Hawke and Barbara Fishpool dropped their charges. With key witnesses in England, it was hard to proceed, and they accepted compensation money from Hart. Today, Hart is back in England, discredited and disgraced. He has never apologised to those he exploited.
You know, if your word is your bond, which mine is, I'm a trusting sort of soul, and I like to think everyone else would act the same way that you, and when somebody quite clearly doesn't, you feel extremely disappointed.
What came back? Anything?
No, nothing come back, and I didn't seek to retrieve the objects that people had paid their good money for.
So what's left?
Well, just memories, I guess.
Hawke was to get 6 of our wickets for 47, a test match best.
The athlete he was seems a distant memory, and the old Neil Hawke may have dealt with the likes of Chris Hart rather differently. But the truth is, to this man, it's only today that matters. He's paying a visit to Bedford Industries, a training and support organisation for people with disabilities. He goes there to lift the spirits of those he says are a bit like him, not quite as quick as everyone else.
How are you, Paul? Okay? I used to play footy against your dad.
Neil Hawke's grip on life will always be a little fragile, but he rejoices in the fact it exists at all, and that those who helped him along the way resisted the urge to let him go.
I'm glad they didn't, because I've caught a few fish since then.
Gee, he was a wonderful athlete in his day. It's just a shame that some people do grow old, and that's terrible, the con man. OK, well, he got his just desserts anyway. Later on Sports Sunday, Dimity Douglas on the downside of high-performance pressure, and a boxing promotion fails to answer the bell.
This was a first-time attempt by the Hells Angels to promote boxing in Adelaide. But, unlike their frequent rock concerts here, this time the public and the media just didn't seem interested.
It was just the nervousness that was so great. I was almost sick and almost crying just from nerves by the time I got to the blocks.
You might not have noticed, but last weekend professional boxing's vacant Australian heavyweight title was decided in a contest which ended in the very first round. But that was only one of the disappointments in a fight which 30 or 40 years ago would have attracted thousands of spectators and nationwide interest. But boxing is not the sport it used to be, and as Chris Hawkins reports, last weekend's title fight was remarkable, not only for how many people stayed away, but for the fact that even one of the contenders didn't really want to be there either.
I didn't think I was good enough to become a professional, or I just wanted to basically get in there and just represent the country and be an amateur fighter.
If ever there was a reluctant heavyweight, Adelaide's 35-year-old Don Mackay is it. He didn't take up the manly art until he was 30, but in just 9 fights as an amateur, he twice won the Australian super heavyweight title, and then they changed the rules on him.
And I basically took up professional boxing for the simple reasons that the age limit stopped me from being an amateur. They brought the age limit down from, I think, 37 to 32, which I was hoping to at least be able to fight in the World Cup that was held in Sydney in 1991 in November.
Do you want pepper on yours, Ashley?
No, a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper.
And if ever there was a reluctant heavyweight's reluctant wife, it's Leanne Mackay, mother to 3 of Don's 6 children, full-time psychology student at university, and, as you might expect, frustrated by hubby's midlife flirtation with a younger man's sport.
Well, he was training younger people, and then he basically, as a bet, he started fighting, and just as an amateur, and that wasn't so bad because they use the large low-impact gloves and the headgear and everything, and only 3 rounds, and anyone gets a blood nose, they stop it, you know, so it's not so bad. But, you know, professional is a whole different thing.
Oh, a good right hand, it's all over. That was a very good right hand, flush on the jaw for Hudson. Hudson will not get up.
In fact, so far, Don's 3-fight professional career hasn't been all that different from his short amateur career. He's won all 3 contests by knockout. Mind you, he hasn't made much money for his efforts, but he says a part-time gymnasium manager, part-time hotel bouncer with 6 kids can't be too choosy, even about the pittance he'll be paid for 12 3-minute rounds tomorrow night.
Whether I win or lose, I still get the same amount of money.
Which is how much?
Which is $3,000.
For 12?
For 12 3-minute rounds.
It's not a lot, win or lose, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not.
So obviously you're not doing this for the money, are you, Don?
Well, I've played a few sports and I've always been second best. And I've always been in the teams and I've always been in the A grades and things, but I've never been the best player. I've never been... And the only thing I've seen it stand out in is in the ring. As in boxing itself, I've seen it get in and do quite a good job.
So the man's mind is made up. He's got to do what he's got to do. And besides, the money will come in handy. As for Leanne, well, what's a loyal wife to do?
So what would be your preferred outcome tomorrow night? Would you rather he get beaten and retire because of that, or would you rather he was successful?
What I would like to see happen, I would like to see him win and then announce his retirement.
And so to the big night, where, as it turned out, Don wasn't the only reluctant participant. An 8-event card staged in a horse auction arena at Morphettville Racecourse, this was a first-time attempt by the Hells Angels to promote boxing in Adelaide. But, unlike their frequent rock concerts here, this time the public and the media just didn't seem interested.
We've had a good look at it and we thought, well, we'd like to get into it and start promoting boxing here in Adelaide.
But your promotions arm is an arm of the Hells Angels, which also does rock concerts and so on and so forth, makes a lot of money. I mean, what is the interest for the Angels for boxing?
Just a personal thing. I think we just like ourselves, we do enjoy the boxing. And like I said, we've got ties with some of the boxers, very close ties, and that's really all it is. We've got to break even or get fairly close to it to make it worthwhile. We realised when we first started it might be a fairly uphill battle, the same as Pondy was for a fair few years. But I mean, I think with a good show, if we continue having a good show, tight show, and everything runs on time and smoothly, and we have good boxing bouts, which Adelaide has got a lot of good boxers, I think, yes, in the future we have not a problem at all. We'll fill this place.
30, 40 years ago, you'd be fighting outside to get a seat. Let's face it, what crowd are here tonight? Well, they're all the lower paying people, and probably they're the type of people that want to see the fights too, you know. I mean, if you're paying, say, $80 for a seat in the front row here, you've got to be a special type of person to love fighting to be able to do that.
2, 1.
As a lifelong fan of boxing, I find it hard to admit that this is a sad night for me. This is, after all, the Heavyweight Championship of Australia, and here we are in a horse sale yard in suburban Adelaide in a pretty thin crowd by any standards to see 2 nice enough blokes with hearts bigger than their talents biff each other around for what amounts to peanuts. Now, for the anti-boxing campaigners, this is probably a great night. For an Australian sports fan like myself, it's just a little bit sad.
And so to the heavyweight championship of Australia, between not Dynamite Don Mackay, not Don the Detonator Mackay, just plain old no-frills Don Mackay, the way he wants it, against Jimmy Thunder, who 6 years ago won the heavyweight gold medal for New Zealand at the Commonwealth Games.